At the start of the 1960s, Cold War tensions were heightening. Confrontation threatened. The two superpowers watched and waited, preparing for a nuclear holocaust. The world's safety depended on mutual assured destruction, the threat of mutual suicide that came to be known as MAD, MAD.
It's not MAD. Mutual assured destruction is the foundation of deterrence.
On the 1st of July 1960, an American RB-47 reconnaissance plane like this took off on a routine mission to probe the radar defenses of the Soviet border.
We took off from Brize Norton Air Base in England. That was our forward operating location on that particular date. And we were supposed to fly this quote-unquote milk run. There's not supposed to be any particular problems during that particular flight. And we thought that this would be a rather simple flight, although it was a 12-hour mission.
They flew in order to detect our radar stations. They wanted to know the location of the air defense system of the Soviet Union. They often flew close to our borders.
We started flying parallel to the Soviet coastline, which had Murmansk and the mouth of the White Sea and so forth up there. And we knew there was quite a bit of activity going on up there by the Russians at that time.
I was on combat duty to intercept, and I flew up to find the enemy. I was guided from the ground. When I saw the enemy plane, I identified it and radioed my base.
The co-pilot said, check, 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 right wing. And the aircraft commander, Major Palm, said, where the hell did that guy come from?
I signaled the plane to follow me. He wouldn't obey. I radioed my base and asked what I should do. An order came back, destroy it. I opened fire, and the plane started to burn.
As the MiG fighters returned to base, John McCone and co-pilot Bruce Olmsted parachuted to safety and imprisonment in Moscow's Lubyanka prison. The 4 other Americans on board had died in midair. On the front line, constant vigilance. War, if it came, would soon go nuclear. American Titan missiles, each with a warhead that could destroy Moscow, were ready to be launched.
It would be done before we had time to stop and think about what we were doing. It doesn't take all that long, and it was just automatic. There was no question in our mind that this was the thing to do.
If we had ever received a launch message over the PAS system, I would have had absolutely no doubt that my life expectancy was measured in probably less than a half an hour. And the only question was, would we be able to launch this missile before the incoming hit us?
Pearl Harbor was still a painful wound in the American psyche. In Alaska, Greenland, and England, ballistic missile early warning radars were in operation. America did not want to be surprised again.
The Cold War was a war that went on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We felt that they were trying to take over the world, and actually we were one of their largest stumbling blocks in that effort. Therefore, we were one of their primary enemies, and their primary target was to take over our country.
They were banging it into our heads, and we couldn't have imagined otherwise. The Americans were aggressors who wanted to conquer the whole world, and we had to protect the world.
In 1961, the new American president, John Kennedy, had taken office in a tense nuclear world. He inherited from Eisenhower the doctrine of massive retaliation.
The term massive retaliation, as it was understood at the end of the 1950s and the beginning of the 1960s, was a policy of responding to major Soviet conventional attacks, for example, in Western Europe, should that have occurred, with a massive nuclear response.
Massive retaliation had been conceived at a time of clear American superiority. Now, the Russians were trying to catch up.
There was a syndrome to catch up and overtake, to try and show everyone that we weren't far behind the Americans, that we too had nuclear weapons. There were those who said that we can only prevent a nuclear war if we oppose world imperialism with a force of similar strength.
Khrushchev sought a dramatic means to remind the West of the power of the Soviets. He broke a moratorium on nuclear testing. October the 30th, 1961. A Russian bomber crew were preparing to drop the largest bomb the world had ever seen.
Одна.
The explosion was the equivalent of more than 50 million tons of TNT, more than all the explosives used in World War II. "50 miles away, people were blown off their feet. Khrushchev said he wanted the bomb to hang like the sword of Damocles over the imperialists' heads. Kennedy took up the challenge.
In view of the Soviet action, it will be the policy of the United States to proceed in developing nuclear weapons to maintain this superior capability for the defense of the free world against any aggressor.
To Kennedy's anger, the super bomb was just one of a series of Soviet nuclear tests.
I remember counting down the seconds, then dropping the bomb. We had to put on special glasses and pull down curtains to protect us against the radiation. We'd put on the glasses, but we'd forget to draw the curtains as we wanted to have a peek. Suddenly, there'd be something like a rising sun. The clouds disperse, and you see a beautiful, beautiful picture, like in a fairy tale. A mushroom growing up and up. It's on top of you, and you're going underneath. The instruments measuring the level of radiation went right off the scale. But of course, we forgot about that. Then suddenly there is a huge blow as the shockwave hits the plane. All the controls go crazy, and you have to grab the joystick and quickly try and get it under control. The plane was thrown from side to side. We knew what a nuclear explosion was like.
It became obvious that the Russians there was no containing them. They were shooting not just this big bomb, but lots and lots of them. And we essentially did the same thing. We went and, we got bombs from wherever we could find them and took them to Nevada and shot them just in order to respond to these Russian tests. It was a crazy period.
In the West, public opinion was turning against the arms buildup and the testing of the bomb. In Britain, what started in 1958 as a march to the weapons centre at Aldermaston swelled to an annual rally of tens of thousands of campaigners for nuclear disarmament.
We did seriously accept the fact that if a nuclear bomb was used in the London area, the effect was going to be so massive over such a geographical area that even people living miles out would have repercussions. And we were quite serious in our expectation that this could happen. The scientists have made it, it's there and available. Somebody's going to want to use it.
Kennedy and his Secretary of Defense McNamara were increasingly aware of the danger of relying on the strategy of massive retaliation.
Nuclear weapons have no military utility whatsoever, excepting only to deter